Hello, everybody. The beer industry, it looks a lot different than it did even just a few years ago, and packaging strategies are evolving right alongside it. Today, I'm joined by Brian from Ironheart Canning to talk about how mobile canning has adapted to meet the needs of today brewers. But Brian, I'm excited to see you. I know we'll be coming up your way to New Jersey this October for their conference, but first, tell us a little bit about yourself, my friend.
Howdy, Andrew. Good to see you, man. Well, hey, so Brian here, work for Ironheart Canning. Been with the company pretty much since day one. And do some other things in the beer world and wear a few other hats. Do a little bit of podcasting with my friends Augie Carton of Carton Brewing, John Hall, all about beer, Justin Kennedy, who also does some beer writing and Steal This Beer. Do a little Instagramming as well. Was once a blog, and kind of the reason I got involved with Ironheart back in 2014 or so. And that is I Drink Good Beer. You can go check out all my beer photography over there. I like to highlight the places I go to and the beers I drink when I can, right? Because if I got a full time job here, there's not much time to gallivant these days. But yeah, I do. I did a lot of stuff, in the early days at Ironheart, helping out the warehouse, pushing cans, and as we grew, we needed, to build a sales team. So I was the first sales guy and kind of ran up and down the coast from New York City all the way up to New England, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts. And as we started expanding, so did the territory, and started taking on more, and eventually, started building the sales team we have here today. Now today, and no longer on the road, but sit at the desk and kind of help with business development and strategy and things like that to continue to help us grow here at Ironheart.
So 11 years at Ironheart. That's a little bit of time. What is it that's kept you there for so long? And what do you believe, based off your experiences, is the value of Ironheart?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the longest job I've ever had. Every other job I've had, it's been all over the place, right? I worked in banking, as a teller and things like that. Worked at a car dealership. And I always had, a passion for beer. And when I started doing the beer blog back in the day, Carton, I bring up Carton Brewing again because, it's kind of like an anchor being in my universe. And, I was doing some photography and video over there, and that's where I met our CEO and founder Tyler, because Carton was the very first New Jersey craft brewery to can beer, kind of in the new age. Right, there was canned beer back in the day. New Jersey is rich in beer history with Newark and being outside New York City. But the new age, right? Carton was there. They're pretty much on the schedule before Tyler got the canning line. So when I, showed up to that first canning run and, boat beer was getting canned, I thought it was just fascinating. I've seen a lot of people start businesses, friends and family, but never saw anything like this before, right? You heard about mobile wine, bottling out in the West Coast because it's a big thing out there with all, the wine, and there's nothing like that in the beer world, and there was very few people canning at the time, and if they did, they had their own equipment, and that equipment wasn't cheap for someone that needed to do something on a small scale once a month or a couple times a month. It doesn't make sense to make that capital investment. So I thought it was very cool what Tyler had started. I just thought it was fascinating that, he's jumping in the truck and he's going from New York City to New Jersey. And then the next day he's up to Massachusetts and he's just running back and forth. And I started seeing him, more often because some of the other Jersey breweries eventually got into cans. And I know a lot of people here in the state that make the beer. So they would let me know that they had canning runs. And I was like, yeah, man, come take some pictures. And, got to hang out with Tyler a little more. And, again, just say like he was bringing value to, the breweries by, having them avoid that capital expense. And, I just, again, just thought it was fascinating. And, eventually one day he offered me that job, and that's where we sit. I think it was about a year into the operation. He's like, I'm seeing you at a lot of these cannon runs. He's just like, you want a job? I said, yeah, I could use a part-time job. Was a starving artist at the time, doing freelance, photos and videos for whoever would hire me. And, business was few and far between. So, being offered a job like that and being able to travel, that brought a lot of value to just my life, personally, and a lot of joy too, right? Because I got to see new places, meet new people, go to new breweries and try new beers. Is just all around, just a lot of value built into that.
I think that's an awesome opportunity. It's crazy. You were talking just over a decade ago, but today we're still having conversations about how breweries can keep things affordable and to hit the goals they're looking to do. And I also had a job earlier in my life that gave me the opportunity to travel quite a bit. And there's nothing like traveling the East Coast beyond just seeing other breweries, meeting people, building relationships. So it's awesome that you had the opportunity to do that, Brian.
Amen.
So you've been doing this a while. You've talked to a ton of people. You're probably soaking in just what would be your advice to someone starting out, just opening up a tap room or brewery?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say that from what I've learned, being around breweries for over a decade, right? Because I've been doing a lot of stuff even before Ironheart. It is probably one of the most difficult businesses to run next to running like a bar or restaurant, right? Like you have so many moving pieces. You work with a lot of different vendors. There's no really one stop shop to support you, right? So it's a big undertaking and it's hard work, starting up one of these businesses. So, especially nowadays, right? It's no secret. Some people have gone out of business. Some people are, kind of shrinking their operations and looking at their businesses differently, and being more strategic with what they're doing. Right. It's just like nobody's clamoring to be, crazy on the shelves anymore, but some people have to, right? Because they're volume breweries. I'd say that's number one thing is like you be strategic and think about what you want to do and really focus on that, right? Do you want to be just a tasting room? Do you want to drive people to come into the place, or do you want to be on the shelves? Maybe you're doing both. Maybe your business is having people come to the tasting room and having a couple beers, food if it's allowed, and they're grabbing some 4-packs, 6-packs to go, but they also need to be on the shelves for the hours they're not open, right? I love that about the craft breweries is, being able to say, well, hey, we're not open today, but you can go here and grab our beer. So there's many ways to play this game, right? So you be strategic, right, in your decision making. Be cautious with spending and, invest in the areas that give you that ROI, that return on investment, because, you might not need this, that, or the other thing. You might want it, but you certainly don't need it. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up and they buy something that they don't need. And I'm, obviously I'm a little biased of what we do, because you get a return on investment every time we're in the door, and you don't have to go buy a canning line that might cost anywhere from $20,000 up to, $1 million, depending on what your needs are, right? If you're only packaging a little bit, or you can package a little bit a month, you're not going to need to buy something that's going to sit in the corner. Same things with, bigger tanks. Do you really need that bigger tank? Can you do it with smaller tanks? Maybe you need a keg washer because, you're washing your kegs at your neighbor's brewery. There's, just a lot of things that I think, people might spend money on that don't necessarily need. So that's, one thing that I can't, preach enough to somebody that might be opening up, right? Like look at what you can get for as least as possible to get along. I always say, bigger is not always better these days, but it can be, right? Because maybe you're opening a facility that's going to have some extra capacity because you want to help other brewers make beers, or offer that tank capacity to maybe other vertical beverages, right? THC is big right now. You're allowed to do it in some states, other states you can't. Could be a money maker for you too. So that's another thing to think about as well. It's just like, do you want to make stuff just for yourself, or maybe you want to figure out another way to have extra capacity for people to come in, fill your tanks, and make some money off of that too. It's definitely something to think about, because it's a big thing right now. There's a lot of brands starting up that need a home. Doesn't matter what the beverage type is, and if you can help them out, you can probably make some money off of it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thought. I mean, I feel like conversations on additional revenue streams are one of the most frequent conversations I hop into. So that's great insight right there.
Yeah, and I'd say just overall think about how big you want to be, right? I got off the phone with a buddy this morning. He's leaving one brewery to go be a head brewer at a brand new one that's opening up, not too far from the one he was working at. And he is beyond excited because every drop of liquid's going to be sold right there in the tasting room. They have zero plans to distribute it. Maybe they'll get it on tap at one or two bars around town, but that's just another big thing to think about too. It's just like, how much saturation do you want in the area, right? Do you want to be in the county? Do you want to be in the region? Do you want to be all over the country? I mean, these are things to think about, right? Like, what's your end mission? It's just like, if you get it far and wide, it's great, right? Because somebody gets your beer out of state, maybe they come and visit family in your state. Now they're gonna reason, oh, hey man, I had this beer and I want to go visit this brewery, when I'm in town. And I love that too. And I think that's, also, a driver as well. So, definitely think about those things, about how big and how far you want to be. Because, right, there's an ask for every seat and, a method to the madness.
Definitely. So, Brian, what's your favorite part about being in the craft industry?
Phew. Well, there's a lot of free beer. I can tell you that from where I sit, and I'm sure a lot of other people will share that, right? I don't buy beer a whole lot because if I'm going to visit a customer, I'm walking out with a 4-pack, or even if it's visiting somebody new that we're not necessarily working with, or an old friend that is working at another brewery. Hey, definitely one of the perks to being around. But I'd say my favorite part is the camaraderie and the friendships that happen, right? One hand washes the other. I've seen a lot of people meet each other at festivals, and next thing you know, they're best buds, and they're starting to make collab beers with each other, and then maybe they're introducing to more people, right? That the friendship circles grow, but also that the networking and the helping of each other, right? XYZ breweries running out of hops down the street, they're happy to call a neighbor, and they're happy to help them out, to get them by while their next order comes in. I think that's probably one of my favorite things about it. And then just innovation, right? I think beer went crazy for a little bit, right? The extreme beer, you had the Extreme Beer Festival by Beer Advocate. You had all these wacky beers. We're not getting away from that, right? People are still making crazy candy beers. They're making, these, fruited sours. And I think, that, development and, bringing new ideas and new flavors, like the new flavor thing, I think is also awesome, right? I like certain flavors of certain things. You might not necessarily have them in alcohol sometimes, but when you see them in alcohol, you're like, oh yeah, pina colada beer, sign me up for that. That sounds like an awesome drink this summer. So, friendships, flavor, and free beer, the 3 Fs, I think are.
Did you plan to make that 3 Fs? Because it turned out real nice.
No, that was off the cuff there. It's the freestyle. Might be the cold medication I'm on here.
No, those are three great points. So, where do you see Ironheart and just the industry going?
I mean, us, right? We're the analogy I like to use is we sell picks and axes in any gold rush, right? We're not prospectors, right? We're not up on the mountain digging for the gold, but we're here to help you if you are. So, we constantly, pivot and shift as we need to, right? We got a big focus on hemp right now, THC, however you want to call it, both in a recreational adult use space as well as all the hemp derived stuff that you see out there on the shelves in certain markets. So, we're always trying to be innovative on our end for how do we create new business, right? And we reorganized our sales team a little bit at the beginning of the year to kind of separate off, 2 guys that focus strictly on mobile canning business, right? They're constantly knocking on the doors of distilleries and cideries, breweries, help even coffee shops, in their local town, trying to get them into maybe a co-packing situation because they don't have, their own production facility. When I got your buddy Kenny, he's our full-time co-packing specialist now and spirit specialist. All he does is focus on, spirit business development and helping manage our co-packing network of all these partners that we have that are batching beverage. And then we obviously have Keegan, who is full-time on that hemp and cannabis, right? He's on the phone all damn day talking to folks about canning up this stuff, and it's making moves. We started this company with being 90% beer, 10% everything else, and that other 10% was pretty much cider when we first started. The pie is now split. We're down 50% beer and then 50% everything else, and that half of the pie encompasses the cocktails, the ciders, the wines, the teas, the coffees, the kombucha, and the hemp. So I think we're just going to continue to grow and pivot as the industry changes as well. I see us lasting a very long time because of that, because we have, kind of this Swiss Army knife approach to getting beverages in cans.
I love the innovation we see taking place right now, Brian, because a few years ago, half those beverages you just rattled off, we weren't even talking about. In some situations, we didn't even want to touch them. Now
No.
we realized as we gain to attract a different audience, keep our audience coming back, just finding new ways to get them excited, we're diving into all those revenue streams and products you mentioned that we never even considered. It's fun to see what people are thinking of.
Yeah, you don't want to poo-poo anything, right? If it's working out for somebody, you might not be able to try it, right? Like I said, it's like you can't do hemp in every state, right? But other people can. So somebody over here might not be able to try that out, even though they may want to. And maybe something changes that, makes them done. But if it is something you were able to do and you're seeing somebody else do it, right? Monkey see, monkey do. If it's working for them, you might as well try it, to see if it works for you, as long as it's not, a tax on, time and money, for you.
Definitely. So looking back on your career doing this, what are you most proud of?
Let's see. I mean, I brought a lot of business on in the years I've been here, and some of those customers are still with us today, which is awesome because they see the value on what we bring to the table of helping them get their packaged goods out. For me, I think it's like bringing someone's dream to life, so to speak, because, somebody reaches out for canning, right? They obviously want to be in cans, and they either don't know how to do it, they know something about it, and we're here to accomplish that mission and get it done with them. So, for me, whether it's somebody looking for our mobile services, right, we're able to help them out. We cover everything east of the Mississippi River out to the Atlantic Ocean and up and down. So we can definitely help that out, right? Or, if they don't have the capabilities, right, we're talking about, again, our co-packing network and introducing them to somebody that can also, be part of that, dream building and bring it to life, because it is kind of a cool feeling to get some startup brands going. That they reach out to us one day not even knowing that we can actually get it done, and most likely get it done pretty quickly depending on the stages that they're in. There's also just a real kind of novice people that want to get into the beverage world. They're like, oh, hey, I got this great idea for a drink. It's like, all right, cool, do you have a formulator? They're like, oh no, I didn't know I needed that. It's like, yeah, you kind of do, because these facilities need a recipe. They need to know how you're preserving the product, so it doesn't re-ferment, doesn't make anybody sick with botulism. There's a lot that goes into it that you need to be prepared for, and sometimes it stops people at the door because they look into that development, and it costs money, right? It all costs money. You're not going to get something done for a couple $100s in this world. It costs thousands, but the folks that do listen and have the guff, they go through with it, right? I'd say some of them have been successful. Other folks, it hasn't. But you don't know unless you take the gamble, right? So it's just like, for me, we have the ability to can anything that you can drink. And there's folks that are watching, will watch this or whatever. Feel free to reach out, because we can definitely get something to life for you.
Awesome. Now, Brian, for anyone reaching out or learning more, what's the best way they can do so?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, ironheartcanning.com. You can find a lot of information there about all our offerings from, co-packing network to, obviously our mobile services, reach out through the website. I'm sitting at my desk 24, well, not 24/7, but I'm at the desk every day. So if you're reaching out, you're getting a quick response, and I'm getting you hooked up with one of my teammates to, have conversations and just move you as fast as you need to move.
Well, Brian, it's always wonderful to see you. Feel better, my friend. And I imagine people reaching out to you. But, I see Ironheart everywhere. You all partner with so many associations. So it's hard to miss Ironheart.
Hey man, well we love the industry, right? And like I said, it's more than beer these days. So we partner up with a lot of folks across a lot of different segments now, and being part of these associations too is some of my favorite things as well, because we're on the trade show circuit, usually at the front half of the year, and it's just like we're all together and seeing that as well, camaraderie amongst vendors and things like that too. Yeah, like I said, we always run into Joey's there
about that circuit, because our brewer friends, they're often stuck at their brew houses so much of the time, but we get to go to all these unique markets, honestly, and pick their brain, get to know them, and kind of see what they're thinking at the exact moment.
Yeah, man.
Well, awesome.
It's a wonderful world. It's a wonderful world we're in the beverage world.
Indeed. Well, Brian, I look forward to seeing you this October at the New Jersey Brewers Conference, and everybody else, don't hesitate to reach out to Brian, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks, Andrew.